I have friends that I think are very good people that are just so sure that the commandments aren't the Ten Commandments. Are you sure about that? Are you really sure about that? Let's look at the text. Is the spirit of the law the spirit of what law? I just had a teacher online just assert that the spirit of the law is not the spirit of the original law. Can you really sustain that from the text? Here's a question. What law was Jesus referring to when he was teaching? He came under the law to redeem those who are under the law. He was teaching under the old covenant. When's the transition to the new covenant? And was Jesus teaching the old covenant or the new covenant? Well, the answer is the apostles got their teachings from Jesus, because the Great Commission says, go ye therefore. Jesus gives the Great Commission, remember? Jesus was the teaching for 3.5 years. He was teaching disciples, his students, the new covenant that he brings by his death. Jesus was teaching the new covenant under the old covenant. And Jesus says, go ye therefore into all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe everything that I commanded you. A lot of people don't put this together. You got to deal with it, especially if you're going around teaching that Jesus has a different set of commandments than his Father. What were the sins that Jesus was forgiving the lost sheep of the house of Israel for? Are they different things that are sins than for the new covenant people, for the whole world? Is it just arbitrary rules, or is it how to be human? God is the creator after all. Seems to me like the Sermon on the Mount is for us. Is it not? Is the Sermon on the Mount for humans or just for Jews? Did Jesus' death save us from following the Sermon on the Mount? Was the Sermon on the Mount teaching the spirit of the law that Jesus was teaching under the Mosaic covenant when he was teaching? How can the spirit of the law not be the spirit of the law of the God? This is absurd to say otherwise. What are the commandments of God? Oh, I don't know. What does James say in the new covenant? What does Paul say? Keeping the commandments of God? If you walked up to Paul when he was teaching and he says, what matters is keeping the commandments of God, and someone said, you don't mean the 10 commandments, do you? What would Paul say? Oh, of course not. Of course I'm not teaching about the law of God as we received it as the Jewish people when they're going around. What did in Acts 15, what are they accusing him of? Not teaching what law? The law that God gave them in person. Who do you think handed Moses the law? Jesus' commandments aren't the 10 commandments. Who do you think handed Moses the 10 commandments? Last I checked, this Jesus is this God. No, Jesus' commandments aren't. When he said, whoever teaches men to break the least of these commandments, was he giving the Jews a reason not to follow him by not talking about the covenant that he came teaching under, the Mosaic covenant? So making the Jews so they shouldn't follow him according to the text? Jesus always referred to the text. Have you not read it as written? Was he teaching something new, something different? Was he not fulfilling the Old Testament prophecies? When he said, whoever teaches men, when he says, don't do like the Pharisees do, but follow what they teach when they teach from Moses. Was Jesus' commandments some different commandments than the 10 commandments? Are you kidding me, people? Are you kidding me? And then when Jesus gives the Great Commission, well, they're still under the law. Well, the new covenant, he gives them the Great Commission. When exactly did the law change exactly? What law? What spirit of what law? And where can I find this law that I need to follow the spirit of? Are we to follow the spirit of the Sermon on the Mount? Was the Sermon on the Mount not a interpretation of the law of Moses? Okay. Jesus was interpreting the law as a rabbi, as a teacher. Is Paul teaching some other law than what Christ gave them in the Great Commission? Or something other than the Sermon on the Mount? This is absurd, people. Absurd. And again, John sees the Ark of the Covenant in the temple in heaven. What do you think that means? What do you think that means? Of course, the commandments of God are the 10 commandments plus. Do you think God gave them some bad law and Jesus is saving us from the bad father law? When Jesus is like, you don't recognize me because you don't have the love of the Father in you. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. Jesus is like, me and my Father are one. I followed his commandments. Now you follow my commandments. You think they're different commandments? Jesus is teaching a different law when he's teaching under the law. And the Jews were told, if someone comes taking you after other gods, how do you think they understood who the true God was? Well, let me give you one clue. The true God who created heaven and earth rested on the seventh day and hallowed it. You think Jesus did away with that? Who do you think that God was in the garden walking with them in the cool of the day? Remember the Trinity thing? These three are one. This Jesus is this God, okay? This isn't hard unless you've been brainwashed by bad teaching. Okay, let's see. Let's see. 1 second, I'm pulling up a quote. Nope. Why, it's not going to let me jump to it. What's going on here? I'm trying to pull this up in some early church writings here. Oh, it's not letting me do that. Oh, that's stupid. Let's see if I can jump to it. Oh man, it's not going to work. Okay, here we go. Okay. Oh, man. Try this one. Never mind. Anyway, the Great Commission, the Sermon on the Mount, are interpretations of the law, what it means to be human. Jesus had to die because the law stands, because it defines sin. Jesus died for sins. He kept the law perfectly, so that righteousness can be put on our account. Is that a different righteousness now? God is on the throne and will not be mocked.